Hello, welcome back to episode 3, season 2 of the Sports Biz Report. Mike Proska here. I'm joined tonight by Kevin Murray and Kevin Rossi. Tonight we're going to switch it up a little bit, talk some hot topic in the sports business world. We're going to have short little discussions one-on-one about a couple topics, and then a 5-minute discussion about Schooled, the Price of College Sports, which premiered Tuesday night in New York City. So first, we're going to start off with Kevin Murray, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Washington Redskins and the issue revolving around their name change. I don't know if you saw Dan Snyder, the owner of the team, sent out a letter a couple days ago saying, really just speaking about how the Redskins are a tradition, their name as a tradition, it's who they are, and really just making his point on why the name should stay the same. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Mike, thanks. You mentioned this letter, which was sent out to approximately 10,000 fans, supporters, and season ticket holders of the Redskins. And this letter was primarily in response to comments made last week by President Obama in a statement, basically saying that that this name, considering the fact that it offends anybody, should be really looked at and spend a lot of time studying the effects of the name. And what we need to, what needs to be done in terms of it. In this letter, Snyder, and also outside of the letter, in terms of press conferences and other statements he's made in the public, has continuously cited 2 different surveys and public opinions about this issue. Primarily an Annenberg survey of 800 Native Americans across 48 states, where I have not seen the survey myself, but apparently only 1 in 10 Native Americans had an issue with the name Washington Redskins. And the other thing he consistently talks about is Virginia area conservation chiefs, so Native American chiefs, actually support the name Redskins as they believe that it it honors the past of their past ancestors and such.
So for those who are opposed to the name Redskins, what would be their main focus on getting the name changed? What would they have to do you think?
In order to get this change, it's not an easy thing to do, considering the fact, obviously there's been name changes and there's been moves in terms of cities for programs before, or for teams before, but it's never been because of strong public distress or public opinion about the actual name itself. It's been based off of other reasons, normally political and economic. So here, this is a really interesting case, and it's really stemmed off of years and years and years of issues in the Native American community, and a lot of issues in the academic community about the use of Indian names, Native American names, such as the Indians or the Fighting Sioux or the Redskins, which a lot of people take to be offensive towards Native Americans. So this is not like this week not something that's only been going on for a week. This is not a short-term conversation. This is something that's been researched and studied for a long period of time. In order to get this changed, I don't really know what the first step would be. I think it would probably need to come down. So it would need to come from a legislature state, and whether that means from the state government or from the federal government. So it's really interesting to, see that President Obama was making a comment about this, considering the current state of the government, which is non-existent. Okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue in itself. But yeah, very interesting topic. Definitely want to keep your eye out for. Something could happen drastically.
Yeah, just to wrap it up a little bit. Ken Belson of the New York Times made a really interesting statement that I completely agree with. That how many people need to be offended by a name of a huge public organization and franchise? Not public in terms of you can trade it on the stock market, but public in terms of it's in the media all the time for it to be changed. Because even if you listen to that Annenberg study, that means that 80 of the 800 Native Americans were offended by it. So if you look at it from the other side, and you go against what Dan Snyder is saying, that if there are 80 Native Americans out of that 800 who are offended, why aren't we, trying to change this?
Yeah, that's a good point to say. Those 80 Americans are offended. Would anyone really be offended if the name got changed?
Right.
So it's give and take. It's interesting concept. Over to Kevin Rossi. I know you follow Fox Sports 1 and their new Fox Sports Live and all those new TV shows, they just acquired rights to 4 Red Bull competitions, signature competitions. And obviously that's a big deal for Red Bull. But what do you think that deal has for Fox? Is it really going up against ESPN? Does it really have any implications, or is it more sort of taking away from maybe NBC Sports, who's another second tier sports TV?
Well, I think you look at Fox Sports 1 and, Fox Sports 2 as well. Where they've struggled the most has been their studio shows. So highlights, they're fine with Fox Sports Live. Even the studio part of that has been the shakiest part of the show. The Crowd Goes Wild has gotten awful ratings even by a new network standpoint. So you look at this Red Bull deal and it gives them more live programming. And that's how ESPN made their name. ESPN grew up with the NFL and then really became the home to live rights. And, this is a way, it's obviously not an NFL level or any of that kind of level, but it's something to give them, unique kind of marketing and, the ability to get out of the studio.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. ESPN started off by having all the different programs, not necessarily just Sports Center for 7 hours of the day and First Take. And I mean, Fox Sports has obviously done that. They have NASCAR all the way to now Red Bull events. They have USA Rugby, and that's a good way to, UFC also. That's a good way to take, put live coverage and sort of take the spotlight off of that Crowd Goes Wild and live highlights. What do you think they'd have to do in order to improve on those other aspects, like the Crowd Goes Wild, to make it, to improve their ratings and sort of somehow in the long run start to compete with an ESPN?
Right. So, improving ratings is kind of twofold. You usually don't go to a network just for their studio or afternoon programming. You go there because you trust it, and you build trust through the major live events. So, that's one way to look at it. Afternoon kind of studio programming is always hit or miss. You look at ESPN, starting in the morning, you have First Take. It's obviously a majorly negative reaction towards that. You have PTI, Around the Horn. Even those start to get a negative connotation towards them. So really, you almost just need to make a product that people don't hate. Mm-hmm. And if you do make a product that people hate, you need to make a product that people hate enough that they hate it out loud. Like Fox, or like First Take, sorry, not Fox, like First Take. Because we always wonder the conundrum on TV. Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless, how do they remain on TV? Well, you all keep watching and you all keep talking about it. That's why they remain on TV. So it's kind of twofold there.
It is. I like the point you made about the trusting a TV show. I mean, that's just going to take time, and I guess you can't really expect to have the greatest ratings right away because no one knows what you're going to be throwing out there. So definitely, I'm a fan of Fox Sports Live. So something definitely.
But Jay and Dan, not the panel part. Correct. Right. Not to ask a leading question, but.
And I also like how they handle the live events and all that, and that sort of just makes me want to at least give their Crowd Goes Wild show some leniency because they're just starting off. But, it will take time for that.
Right.
Okay, back over to Kevin Murray. Just a quick question. You studied in London over the summer.
Yeah.
And recently the NFL just announced they'll have 3 games next year over there. When you were over there, did you see any signs of maybe American football growing? If so, is it because that NFL is trying to, get more fans over there, and even NCAA football is over there?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was there, I was doing everything I could to avoid American sports, so I was trying to really engulf myself in cricket and tennis and as much soccer as possible. But yes, there is a growing interest for NFL football overseas, and I think a lot of that has been thanks to the talk of possibly moving an expansion franchise there, and the major support from facility owners and managers such as at Wembley Stadium, who have been very vocal, more vocal than any NFL owner has been about moving a franchise there. they've been all about trying to bring an American football franchise there. Primarily, the ones in discussion have been the Jaguars. But there's also been a lot of negative comments on the Jacksonville fan side, even though there might be 8 of them. There's still been a lot of talk that, who wants 7 games in London? Their Jacksonville fans don't. So
neither do other NFL teams. I don't want to.
Right,
to go over there.
And then we're talking all this travel issues. People already complain about travel stress. And then you're talking about a 5-hour time change and an 8-hour, 7-hour flight. So that's if you come from the East Coast. Imagine Oakland, who, ironically enough, is going next year to play a home game in London. That's a full day of travel just to play a game, which is, a practice day and what would normally be a day. Well, actually, would probably normally be a day off for players. They're not going to miss a day of practice. So I think the interest is there. The interest is there for 3 or 4 games a year.
Can it be done?
I'm not sure that the interest is there for a franchise team yet. But I mean, this talk has been 5-10 years from now. It's not next year.
Not to hijack this, I apologize, but it's a spectacle right now. When stadiums first started having lights, it was like this awesome thing to have a night game. And then, like the NHL and the Winter Classic outdoors. If a team played all 41 home games outdoors, it wouldn't look so sweet anymore. So
it could take away from the beauty of it, really. If there's 8 games over there instead of just that one.
And what's interesting about the NFL is, internationally, there is that interest in basketball, and there is that interest in baseball. And, if you think hockey, there's a small interest in Northern Europe with players who have come over here to play. But how many NFL athletes can you name from Europe?
Exactly. Is
there one? There was one. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. A few years back from England, but I can't name a single one. So there's a reason why the interest is not there. They don't have that homegrown spirit. Whereas you look at basketball and there are players, the Gasols, who are big name stars in Spain, and then they're coming over to the U.S. to play. So that's where that attention is. So maybe we see somebody coming out of a rugby club in England and they come over to the U.S. and play football. Who knows? But I think you need to have some star to portray it.
I agree. I do think it's a long shot, and if it were to happen, it would not be anytime soon. Definitely. Okay, we're going to move on to Schooled, the price of college sports. Both of you actually had the privilege of going to the premiere in New York City.
Yep.
First of all, would you like to talk about that experience in itself, and then following, the implications of this documentary and what it has for the pay-for-play discussion in college athletics?
Sure. So, I mean, this was a great experience for me, and I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the group on that. This was my first trip with Dr. S. So, that's always a blast. She's great for that because she, first off, knows so many people and is willing to connect you with them, and also will add in her bits of information on the side to supplement whatever is happening. So it's always a good time. The event was great. It was a media event. Nice. The Paley Center for Media is a very, very nice place.
It was green carpet.
Yeah, the green carpet going with the turf theme. Networking reception. Then we saw the film, and then there was a panel discussion moderated by Sean Gregory of Time Magazine. Panel was Dominique Foxworth, who was in the film. He's the president of the NFLPA. Taylor Branch, whose ebook and long-form magazine article, The Shame of College Sports, is the basis for the film. Andrew Moscato, who is the producer of the film. And Devin Ramsey, who is a former fullback at the University of North Carolina, whose story and plight with the NCAA was pretty heavily focused on in one section of the film. So it was a great event.
Yeah.
In terms of implications of the documentary, there's this talk of payment for college sports is once again not a new topic. This is something that's been talked about, researched for a long time, and I've had the joy of working with Dr. S on multiple research projects about this topic, particularly the one that came out called the $6 billion heist last year, along with the National College Players Association, which pretty much outlined basically the shortcomings that come from a college scholarship and what is being missed. And it was, mentioned in the film about this $3,500 shortcoming in a UCLA running back scholarship. So as a California resident, his scholarship was worth $28,000, but the UCLA website lists the cost of attendance at $31,500. So he was short $3,500 based on the scholarship. So that's just an example, But moving forward, I think this is going to be, now that it's moved into a film and pushed by a pretty major media outlet in terms of Epix, who does a lot of documentary-based film work in the entertainment sector, so in comedy, music, and now sport, that this could be maybe the biggest splash yet. And having Taylor Branch's name associated with it is really a big deal.
So, sorry, to jump off of that, when The Shame of College Sports published in the Atlantic in the fall of 2011, Frank DeFord, who's a Sports Illustrated writer, called it the most important piece of writing ever written about college sport. And it may sound simplistic to liken it to League of Denial and what that is doing for concussions in the NFL, but really League of Denial has kind of done what The Shame of College Sport did to college sports back when that came out. These are both very similar, and it's funny because they the New York media premiere for Schooled was on the same day as the public premiere of League of Denial and the release of the book. But really, you don't get new information in the film, but what it does is it presents it in a way that it really is kind of eye-opening, thought-provoking, really hits home with you. And the thing that I like the most about Taylor Branch's work with this, which I think the film reflected greatly, is that the focus isn't on, well, is a scholarship enough money for an athlete? Should athletes get paid? It doesn't focus on that. It focuses on the basic civil rights of the athlete. And I think that's, as he said in the film, that's where you have to start. If you're talking about paying somebody, well, let's look at, what they're afforded and allowed to afford from the start. You have to start with the building blocks, and civil rights is that.
Right. To go off of that, a very interesting quote in the movie was said by Arian Foster, running back of the Texans, who's been very vocal about this topic in recent weeks. But he spoke about when he was preparing to speak for this documentary, he looked up the definition of indentured servant. And, if you haven't, look it up. And if not, check out my post from this just past week on the Sports Complex, because it's kind of frightening to see the similarities. There's a structured period of time. They receive clothing, room and board. Well, not room and board, but housing, food, in order for their services. So, the association with indentured servants is very interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you also mentioned something about playing a football game in front of, 17,000 fans.
107,000 fans.
107,000 fans. That's a big difference. Mm-hmm. And going home and not having any food or money in his wallet to eat.
Right.
And I think it's coach ball and tacos.
Right.
So that happened.
It's amazing, though, how many athletes, though, they go out and play, and then they don't put two and two together. Like, I'm struggling. I just made how much money for the university? And, Foster was one who made that connection and then put it together in a well-stated.
And they really don't even have the time to make that connection because they're really performing a full-time job. And if they speak out against it, they lose that scholarship.
Right. So back to some studies done previously by Dr. Starowski, the required the maximum amount of hours that an athlete can spend per week doing sport-related activities. So that's an interesting word. Sport-related activities is 20 hours of required sport-related activities. Yet, the average amount of credits taken by, a student-athlete across the board is less than 15. So that's just an interesting topic, which is hours in a classroom. And then if you look at anything above that 20 hours are volunteer time, which, could be 20 more hours, could be 30 more hours, you don't know. And these volunteer practices are not volunteer by any stretch of the imagination.
They're defined if you're going to play.
They're defined not only if you're going to play, but if your scholarship's going to be renewed next year. So, this is like this leash that is held on by not only NCAA, but most of its institutions is held pretty tight.
And you also have some creative accounting that goes into how those hours are calculated, like under the NCAA rule. Because, even here at Drexel, I've heard multiple athletes stand up at the front of the room and go through their week. And, Drexel doesn't have football, for any listeners that don't know. So we're not talking about any big-time sports here. We're talking about Drexel mid-major sports. And, they're putting in full-time hours, not playing football.
Yeah, definitely a film that can, the pay-for-play conversation has been going on, but this film can really bring the topic really to a whole national, another level, and really actually start to talk about a change in the governance of the NCAA and really paying athletes.
And it's so much more than payment of athletes. That's what I started off as mentioning, and that's what maybe the baseline for this film is about. But really, it's, as Kevin mentioned, the baseline treatment of athletes is so far below where it needs to be and where it should be.
Mm-hmm. So definitely, if you're interested, which you really should be, it airs October 16th, 8 p.m. on Epix. Definitely take a look. And Jay Billis is featured in it, and we all know he's spoken out against the NCAA for a while now, especially recently. So very interesting topic. So right before we wrap it up, I just want to quick Jay-Z. We seem to talk about him a lot on here. He's got certified in the NBA, National Basketball Players Association. Does that really mean anything for him, or nothing really at all?
I actually think that that's going to hurt him. Interestingly enough, and I don't really know the exact legality of being a certified agent by the NBAPA, but I can't see it helping him in any stretch of the imagination. His name is big enough that I don't think he needed that title next to him. That's not even going to be there. But I don't know if somebody else has a different opinion on it.
Yeah, I happen to agree. He's already got his name as big as it could be. What is this really going to do? He didn't
need somebody to report to.
Exactly.
Right. So
I'll just wait for the Picasso baby video in the NBA offices.
In the NBA offices.
Get David Stern.
Might be coming soon. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this week's Sports Biz Report. For Kevin and Kevin number 2, I am Mike. Stay tuned to the blog, and updates will be coming about the conference. Thank you.